South Africa is determined to move beyond words in its call for the state of Israel to be charged for possible war crimes in Gaza. While on a working visit to Qatar last week, let's remind you that President Cyril Ramaphosa said babies, women, including injured people who are being treated in Gaza's hospitals were, quote-unquote, dying like flies because of the Israel-Hamas conflict. South Africa's ambassador to Netherlands is Vusi Madonsela, officially submitting the country's referral to the ICC in The Hague. Now, the country is calling for Israel to be held accountable. The ambassador, Madonsela, joining us now for a conversation about the mission you embarked upon last week. Ambassador, good morning to you. Let me begin with what we were told here by the Minister in the Presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, on Monday, telling the nation that you personally handed over South Africa's referral to the ICC for Israel to be investigated. Can you give us a brief summary of the key grievances here?
Well, good morning, Boli, and good morning to the viewers and listeners. I can confirm that on 17 November this year, I personally, in the company of a colleague of mine, hand-delivered South Africa's referral of the Palestinian situation to the Office of the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. Of course, that referral is predicated on South Africa's grave concerns about the current events taking place in Gaza, especially reports on the loss of civilian life and the destruction of civilian property. Of course, we are convinced that in the case of Palestine, the International Criminal Court has jurisdiction over three typologies of crimes, and these include genocide, war crimes, as well as crimes against humanity. What we're very clear about, of course, is that international humanitarian law provides that in armed conflicts, be it in a domestic or cross-border context, belligerent parties may not target civilians or civilian property, because doing so may in fact constitute war crime. And we've seen these many instances of that happening in Gaza in recent times. May I also say that international law provides that even in attacks on military targets that carry a risk of loss of civilian life, that in those instances, excessive force may not be used, even if it means that there are concrete or direct military advantages to be made, as long as risk to civilian life is involved. Belligerent parties are restrained by international law from, in fact, carrying out such attacks. And we've seen instances where health facilities have been bombarded, ostensibly in order to hit at somebody who was believed to be on the premises of that hospital, in total disregard of the many lives that were placed at peril.
Ambassador, if you allow me to just step in here for a moment, these are very strong words that South Africa believes that crimes such as genocide is what Israel is involved in. Let me ask you this question then. Were you required to give supporting material in the form of evidence, perhaps, to bolster South Africa's argument?
Perhaps what needs to be understood is that the Rome Statute provides an opportunity for state parties to refer a situation for investigation. We don't need, as a state party, to provide evidence because remember the process commences with the referral to the prosecutor being made for the office of the prosecutor to commence an investigation. So we don't need to provide evidence. The prosecutor has a duty to conduct an investigation, to gather evidence independently of what we may say, what we may have seen on TV, what we may have heard as accounts from other third parties. Yeah. It is the responsibility of the prosecutor independently to carry out such an investigation. So we didn't need to provide evidence, but we have cited instances that we perceive to be indicative of the fact that various crimes have indeed been committed.
Is there a turnaround time for when the office of the prosecutor should respond by?
Well, perhaps I should start by saying that the office of the prosecutor has publicly acknowledged the receipt of our referral, which is supported, as you know, by several other countries. But may I say that the prosecutor in his public statement, which is publicized on the website of the International Criminal Court, has confirmed that an investigation is already ongoing and that it encompasses conduct that may amount to Rome Statute crimes committed since June 2014 in Gaza and West Bank, including East Jerusalem. And of course, that this investigation will now extend to incidents that have taken place since October 7 this year.
Yeah.
So, I must stress that the prosecutor operates independently. So, whether or not the prosecutor is able to proceed with the prosecution of anybody will depend on how soon the prosecutor is able to gather the evidence required before an indictment can be issued against anybody.
Yeah.
So there is no telling as to how soon the investigation will be able to deliver evidence that would enable the prosecutor to approach the court. And perhaps this is one other matter that I must also point out, that what happens is that once evidence has been gathered by the office of the prosecutor, it is not the prosecutor that issues a warrant of arrest against any person. Mm-hmm. What the prosecutor does is approaches the pretrial chamber of the International Criminal Court to bring an application for a warrant of arrest to be issued by the court, not by the prosecutor.
Right.
So, in a sense, it will depend on how much evidence is gathered and how quickly that can be done. Of course, we are also alive to the fact that, as you know, Israel is not a state party to the Rome Statute, and so far they have prevented the office of the prosecutor from gaining access to any of the territories of Palestine. You would know that in order to gain entry into Palestine, you have to go through Israel first, and that Israel has so far been able to use that vantage position to prevent any investigations from taking place. So, based on such information, there is no telling as to how soon the investigations would be completed for any action to be taken by the prosecutor. But our expectation is that all must be done for evidence to be gathered, including interacting with witnesses outside the territory of Israel, outside the territory of Palestine, to gather whatever evidence that is available for the office of the prosecutor to make a determination whether or not the court must be approached to issue a warrant of arrest, for an example.
Ambassador, never before, and of course I stand to be corrected here, never before has Israel faced so much pressure from countries of the world in regard to what they have been accused of implementing against the people of Palestine. And I'm prefacing this with the question that I want to come to next, and that is, do you believe there is good reason to leave room for disappointment for a state like South Africa, because the very reason you have approached the court with a referral to investigate war crimes is that you want the ultimate result to be that arrest warrants must be issued? And I'm saying this because this dates back to 2018, and South Africa is on record as saying the ICC has been dragging its feet on this matter. Do you believe there's room for disappointment?
We do not wish to entertain any room for disappointment, because the determination that we have is shared by many countries around the world, including some which did not refer the matter to the International Criminal Court. And we believe that everything must be done. And as you know, the arm of the law, including international law, is very long. It may not happen sooner, but it definitely would happen in time. And we hope that that time is shorter rather than longer.
Israel has a very strong ally in the form of the United States. Do you believe that that could stand in the way of these crimes being prosecuted?
I do not believe that anybody would be able to stop the prosecution from happening if they are committed to international law, to the rule of law. We would like to see the law taking its course, and we would be surprised if anybody, including the big powers, would stand in the way of a person who stands accused of such heinous crimes being protected from having to face justice. Of course, it is up to whoever would be indicted by the court to raise whatever defense they have. But it's not up to state parties to use their military might and their political power to interfere with the workings of the court.
Do you believe that the United States has used its political power? It is not a state party. It is not, in other words, a signatory to the Rome Statute. In other words, it doesn't belong to the ICC as in countries like South Africa. But do you believe that in the past they have used their political power to influence the decisions of the International Criminal Court?
Well, there generally have been perceptions that the United States has, in some instances, used their power to influence the decisions of the court. Whether or not any tangible evidence can be found is something that you and I may not be able to determine. So I'm not in a position to say categorically that the United States has done so. But what is interesting, though, is that in some instances, even where, as we know, the United States is not a party to the Rome Statute, they have made pronouncements in some instances in support of a decision by the prosecutor to indict other persons, even if those persons are nationals of a non-state party to the Rome Statute. The United States has expressed support for prosecutions to in fact happen. So in the same vein, we would expect consistency on their part, that they should, in the event that a warrant of arrest is issued against, for an example, Prime Minister Netanyahu, that they should in fact allow the law to take its course, or else they risk denting their image in the international platform.
Very interesting comments indeed. Ambassador, final question to you. South Africa is on record as having taken a non-aligned stance on the Russia-Ukraine war. And critics are going to say, why should South Africa be taken seriously in this particular instance when you have, perceptively speaking, when you have been viewed as supporting the aggressor, even though the stated position is clear that you're non-aligned?
Indeed, I will reiterate the position that South Africa remains non-aligned in relation to the conflict that I believe you are alluding to, the conflict in Ukraine. And our position is very clear, that in a situation where geopolitics are so much at play, where entering the fray would force one to have to choose a side between one superpower against the other, it would not be in South Africa's interest to do so. But in fact, what we have done is to call for negotiations, to call for dialogue. But beyond that, our president has led a peace initiative involving several other African leaders to Ukraine and to Moscow to intervene effectively and bringing to the attention of the parties the need for a peaceful resolution of this conflict. And I believe that South Africa has made significant strides in that context to inspire confidence both in Ukraine and in Moscow that South Africa is playing a very constructive role. And you may have heard when the foreign minister of Ukraine visited South Africa last week, I believe it was the 6th of November.
Yes.
Observations they have made was that they were happy with what they perceived to be shifts in South Africa's position. Of course, South Africa has not shifted. If anything, it has clarified what its stance has always been. And the fact that South Africa is assisting, especially with the repatriation of children that were taken from Ukraine at the beginning of that conflict. The South Africa is playing a more constructive role, and in fact, even Ukraine has acknowledged that role, and in fact, South Africa is making significant strides together with African leaders that are part of that initiative. Yeah. So, but the point I'm making is that people are listening to us, including the warring parties are listening to us. The fact that we are non-aligned in that situation is clearly understood. Of course, there will be those who have misgivings about it because they would wish us to pick a side. But we do not believe that picking a side would be in South Africa's national interest. But in the case of Palestine, this is a historical position. That we've always believed in a two-state solution with Israel and Palestine living side by side one another in peace with each other. And of course, that the experiences that the people of Palestine are going through are in many ways very similar to the experiences we've been through as South African people. So, and we believe that the plight of the people of Palestine is not different from the plight we've had in the pre-liberation phase in our country. Yeah. And that our destiny is inextricably connected with the destiny of the people of Palestine. And that is a matter of principle for South Africa.
Ambassador Madonsela, as a parting shot, here's a parting shot. Yeah. South Africa is among a number of countries that have already taken this step of referring Israel to the ICC to be investigated for war crimes. There is a meeting, an extraordinary meeting of the BRICS formation, and there are a number of powerful countries in there. if they so come to a decision that they too, as a united bloc, are going to make a referral to the ICC for Israel to be investigated for war crimes, do you think it'll be easy for the ICC to ignore such pressure?
Well, perhaps I should start by saying that it is very unlike for BRICS as a bloc to make that kind of referral, because the BRICS is not a state party. It is an intergovernmental organization. And amongst those states that form part of BRICS, there are countries that are not signatories to the Rome Statutes. They have not ratified the Rome Statute, so they are not states parties to the Rome Statute. For that reason, I don't believe that they would be in a position to make any referral to the prosecutor. The only way that such states parties, and in this instance I'm referring to countries like China, Russia, who are members of the Security Council, the only way that such countries that are not parties to the Rome Statute can refer a matter, a situation, to the International Criminal Court is through a United Nations Security Council resolution. Only in that capacity, but not as members of BRICS or any other formation. But from the point of view and under the clouds of the United Nations Security Council, in that instance only would they be able to do so.
Ambassador Madonsela, let me thank you very much for your time. It has been not only an eye-opener, but also an educational conversation. Thank you very much for your time.
It is my pleasure entirely, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Vusi Madonsela, South Africa's ambassador to The Hague. Okay.